exhibit on the Spanish-American War. So wait for that very interesting exhibit when it's announced. Anyway, there are two real powers in the Pacific after World War I. A very reluctant United States and a very ambitious Japan. And World War II in the Pacific actually began on September 8, 1931, with a Japanese attack on Manchuria. This attack was not dictated by the civilian government. The civilian government did not know anything about it. It was done by the military in an attempt to force the civilians to recognize the military's power, to prevent a nationalist Chinese takeover of Manchuria, and the whole thing was over an incident staged by the Japanese over the Southern Manchurian Railroad. Now, the conflict that began in 1931 kind of seethed and went back and forth for a number of years until it finally exploded in flames as a Sino-Japanese War of 1937. The United States, a close friend of China and a strong interest in the Pacific, remained neutral. We condemned the Japanese actions. We declared that we would protect all American rights, but we avoided all punitive diplomacy, keeping a very even keel over this. For example, we did not invoke the Neutrality Act, which Congress had passed in 1935, 36, and 37 to keep the United States out of foreign activities. Even after the USS Panay incident, which occurred in 1937 in the Yangtze River in China, when a Japanese bomber strafed an American gunship, killing one correspondent and 2 crew members, nothing was done. Again, the Japanese military did this, not the civilian government, and the government actually apologized to the United States and paid reparations. So even that kind of activity did not rile the United States up to a war pitch. An example of this is shortly after the Panay incident, when FDR went on the radio and gave his very famous quarantine speech, where he advocated, quote, quarantining those nations infected with the epidemic of lawlessness, unquote. Such a tremendous public outcry against this that FDR had to back down again for a number of years. But there's increasing tension between not only the Japanese and the Chinese, but the Japanese and American interest in China. And as these incidents escalated, the United States and Japan decided they had to negotiate. They have to somehow come to terms. And as they begin to negotiate, they also try to strengthen their hands. And in May of 1940, FDR transferred the United States Navy from its base in San Diego, transferred it to Pearl Harbor to strengthen, again, American presence in the Pacific. In June, FDR demanded that all American exporters of oil and iron had to be licensed. And that's where Japan was getting most of its oil and iron. In July, the United States stopped all shipment of oil to Japan. In August, Japan got the puppet government of France, Vichy France, to surrender all her bases to Japan in northern Indochina. It's an escalating period here. In September, the United States cut all shipment of oil and iron to Japan. And in response, Japan joined the tripartite pact with Germany and Italy, forming the Axis. Then there's a period of calm, at least diplomatically speaking. In July of 1941, the Soviet Union is now at war with Germany and uninterested in what's going on in the Pacific. So Japan compels Vichy France to turn over all the southern Indo-Chinese bases. FDR freezes all Japanese assets in the United States. Japan freezes all American assets in Japan. It's rising to a fever at this point. On August 17th, the United States warned Japan, stop or we will take all steps necessary, never defining what those necessary steps were to be. In October, an ominous thing occurred in Japan as the civilian government was overthrown and a militaristic government under General Hideki Tojo took charge of Japan. And it is that government that on November 3rd made the decision to attack the United States. Meanwhile, the United States and Japan continued to negotiate in Washington, D.C. Now we have broken the Japanese secret code. So we know what's going on, and we have now learned that if there's no agreement by November 29th, quote, this is out of the code, things are automatically going to happen, unquote. But what things? We don't know. We suspect action in the southwestern Pacific. The demands that we're making back and forth in these negotiations will give you an idea that there's absolutely no way these two sides can coexist. We were demanding of Japan that they respect all international treaties, that they get out of China and Indochina, that they accept Chiang Kai-shek as the government of China, and that they would quit the tripartite pact. Well, Japan's not having any of that. They said, if you want to solve this, you get Chiang Kai-shek to accept our terms. Then we'll get out of China and Mongolia, and we'll decide for our own as far as the tripartite pact. For all, Japan regards itself and is a sovereign nation. It cannot be dictated to by the United States. On November 26, Secretary of State Hall said to Secretary of War Stimson, I have washed my hands of it, and it is now in the hands of you and Knox, the Army and Navy, realizing that there is no peaceful solution to this. On December 1st, Japan dismissed all American demands, although it did say it wanted to continue negotiations. We are aware of suspicious Japanese troop movements, and we suspect that Japan is going to attack the Southwest Pacific. FDR's thinking now, is an attack on British-owned and controlled Singapore going to get the United States angry enough to go to war? We're not suspecting anything in Hawaii. On December 6th, FDR sends his peace appeal, final peace appeal, to the Emperor of Japan. It's a little late, and Japan would not even consider it anyway. Now this brings us up to, of course, Pearl Harbor Day, today, 50 years ago. And I do hope that you're all taking notes, because there will be a quiz after Darla and I get done here, before you're allowed to leave. So I hope you're taking notes here. While the negotiations are going on, Admiral Nagumo's task force is sailing, and it has not been spotted. It is maintaining complete and total radio silence. On November 5th, a war message is broadcast to the fleet that the war is on. Everything is on schedule. It's a go. Earlier intelligence had indicated that Japan was interested in Hawaii, but American intelligence officers did not take this seriously. They felt it was a smokescreen for the real action in the Southwest Pacific. Messages to the commanders in Hawaii were misleading and tentative. For example, Admiral Husband E. Kimmel, in charge of the Navy, feared attack by subs in the harbor. The best way to protect from a submarine attack is to bring all your ships very close together. General Walter Short, in charge of the Army and Army Air Force, feared sabotage. Best way to protect against sabotage is to bring all your planes very close together, wingtip to wingtip, nose to tail. Both exactly the wrong things to do in case of an air attack, but we're not expecting an air attack. At 5:50 a.m. on December 7th, Nagumo's fleet, the 6 carriers and others, were at the takeoff place 220 miles north of Hawaii. In Washington, D.C., the Japanese ambassador delivered a note to General Marshall at 1 o'clock, or 7:30 Hawaii time. We're expecting something, but what? We don't know. General Marshall is so confident, really, of what's going on or what isn't going on, that he sends a warning message to Hawaii, but he sends it by Western Union instead of by the military telegraph, which might have alerted Short and Kimmel in enough time to make some preparations. We'll never know. At Pearl Harbor, things go on as usual. The band aboard the USS Nevada is playing the Star-Spangled Banner as part of its everyday flag ceremony. Suddenly, there's a torpedo, just misses the ship. The bomber, it's a Japanese bomber, strafes the band. One sailor responds, "This is the best goddamn drill the Army Air Force has ever put on." Well, needless to say, it was not a drill. And at 7:58, the news went out. Air raid Pearl Harbor, this is no drill. The attack at Pearl Harbor lasted 2 hours. 2 waves of Japanese planes came in. An early warning by 2 off-duty radar trainees was ignored. Radar is new at this time, new installation in Pearl Harbor, in Hawaii. 2 of these off-duty guys were just playing around with it, saw a whole mess of blips coming in from the north. Well, they called their superior. The superior said, don't worry about it. It's a flight of B-17s that we're expecting in from California. Well, it was not the B-17s, it was the Japanese. But an interesting sidelight is that those B-17s arrived during the attack and landed unarmed in Pearl Harbor. The Japanese damaged or destroyed 8 battleships, 3 light cruisers, 4 other ships, destroyed 188 planes, countless installations, killed 2,433, and wounded 1,178. The Japanese lost 29 planes, 5 midget subs, and less than 100 men. FDR appeared before Congress with his war message declaring this to be Day of Infamy, and after 4 hours, Congress voted to go to war. The vote in the Senate was unanimous. The vote in the House of Representatives was 388 to Jeanette Rankin of Montana, the sole dissenting vote. On December 11th, Germany and Italy obliged FDR and declared war on the United States. It's the only reason we got involved in the European war, is that Germany and Italy declared war on us. Now I'd like to take a few minutes, 10 minutes or so, to talk about the Japanese Americans and how we treated those people. To mobilize people for a war and to generate the enthusiasm necessary to make the sacrifices in a war, it's almost compulsory to portray them as inhuman. The Germans were the incarnation of evil. The Japanese were subhuman and treacherous. Well, Pearl Harbor, the intensity of the fighting in the Pacific and the atrocities that were there. Time magazine, reporting about the Iwo Jima conflict towards the end of the war, titled that particular article, Rodent Extermination, and went on to say that the ordinary, unreasoning Jap is ignorant. Perhaps he is human. Nothing indicates it. Admiral Halsey's motto was kill Japs, and then kill more Japs. But while it's understandable to unleash hatred against a foreign enemy, what is less understandable is the decision taken early in 1942 to single out about 120,000 Japanese Americans, 2/3 of them United States citizens. Now, part of it is certainly racial. A lot of tension existed between the Japanese Americans and the white Americans, particularly in California since the turn of the century. But we have to remember that there was no removal of Japanese Americans in Hawaii, where the population was some 32% of Japanese descent. Nor was there any removal of German Americans or Italian Americans during this time period. And yet, perhaps it is understandable because of Pearl Harbor. There is panic, there is terror, and the Japanese Americans are easily identifiable. Intercepted cable traffic from Tokyo, this is that secret code that was broken, codenamed Magic, seemed to implicate Japanese Americans in plots in the United States. Subsequent investigation indicates that no such plot existed, and the cables did not even indicate that as well. But there still is going to be fear of sabotage, fear of espionage. But nothing happens. There is none. California Attorney General Earl Warren, speaking before a congressional committee, states, "We are just being lulled into a false security, and the only reason we haven't had a disaster in California is because it has been timed for a different date." This lack of evidence of Japanese activity only confirmed people's suspicions. Lieutenant General John DeWitt, who is head of the Western Defense Command, stated, "The very fact that no sabotage has taken place to date is a disturbing and confirming indication that such action will be taken." There's also General DeWitt who stated, "A Jap's a Jap. It makes no difference if he is an American citizen." A few months later, before a congressional committee testifying about whether or not the Japanese Americans should be allowed back, General DeWitt declared, I don't want any of them here. They are a dangerous element. There is no way to determine their loyalty. There is a feeling developing, I think, in certain sections of this country that the Japanese should be allowed to return. I am opposing it with every proper means at my disposal. Mr. Bates of the Congressional Committee stated, "Would you base your determined stand on experience as a result of sabotage or racial history, or what?" General DeWitt, "I first of all base it on my responsibility. I have the mission of defending this coast and securing vital installations. The danger of the Japanese was, and is now, if they are permitted to come back, espionage and sabotage. It makes no difference whether he is an American citizen, he is still a Japanese. American citizenship does not necessarily determine loyalty." Mr. Bates, "You draw a distinction, then, between Japanese and Italians and Germans. We have a great many of Italians and Germans, and we think they are fine citizens. There may be exceptions." General DeWitt, "You needn't worry about the Italians at all, except in certain cases. Also the same for the Germans, except in individual cases. But we must worry about the Japanese all the time until he is wiped off the map. Sabotage and espionage make problems as long as he is allowed in this area, problem which I don't have to worry about." Maybe a farmer stated it best of all, farmer out here in the West. "It's a question of whether the white man lives in the Pacific or a brown." That perhaps states it for the majority of individuals. Well, in response to this fear, to the public hysteria, FDR issued Executive Order 9066, ordering the internment and relocation of Japanese Americans. These individuals were forced to sell their property, everything they owned, on short notice, usually to unscrupulous white buyers who had envied their property for a long time. Typically, evacuation notices were posted on telephone poles, allowing 2 days' notice to evacuate, and all you could take was what you could carry. For example, Mary Oda's family lived on 30 acres in the San Fernando Valley. Had just bought a new tractor worth $1,200, owned 3 cars, 3 trucks, and had its crops, naturally. That family got $1,300 for the total. It's no wonder that Yuji Ichikoka said, "So the great fire sale got underway." That's really what happened. The Japanese Americans were first herded into detention centers and then sent to relocation centers, usually in remote, bleak sections of the country. By September, there were 10 such camps located in Arkansas, Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming. 2,000 high-risk Japanese Americans were put under high security. This includes the 650 Japanese American males who were interned right here in Fort Missoula in 1942. These were only men. They were normally Japanese language teachers or teachers of the martial arts. They were Buddhist priests or community leaders. These were typically those labeled high risk. Now, to accomplish the relocation, Congress established the Civilian War Relocation Authority, and Milton Eisenhower, brother of General Dwight Eisenhower, was the first director. And he envisioned a very humane treatment, allowing the Japanese Americans to work outside the camps during the day and then come back to the camps at night. Wyoming Governor Nell Smith warned, however, if this were allowed, if the Japanese were allowed outside the camps at all, there'd be, quote, "Japs hanging from every tree," unquote. The Idaho Attorney General, Bert Miller, stated, "We want to keep this a white man's country." Eisenhower resigned. The relocation went on. To demonstrate their loyalty, most of the Japanese Americans acquiesced very quietly. Just by going along without making trouble, they're demonstrating their loyalty. In February of 1943, Congress demanded that these people sign loyalty oaths, and some 85% did, forswearing all allegiance to Japan and swearing allegiance to the United States. But certainly the greatest proof of the loyalty of the Japanese Americans was the service of the 23,000 Nisi Japanese Americans, second generation. They served in the United States Army, barred from the Marines and the Navy, by the way. They won, this is 23,000 men, they won 18,000 decorations, the Medal of Honor, 560 silver stars, 28 with oak leaf clusters, and 9,486 Purple Hearts. 6,000 of them served in the Army intelligence in the Pacific and helped to crack Japan's Operation Z, helping the Americans to win the Battle of Leyte Gulf in the Philippines. In Europe, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, combined with the Hawaiian 100th Battalion, had as its motto, "Go for broke," and they certainly did. They suffered a 300% casualty rate, an incredible casualty rate. Their most celebrated mission was the rescue of the Texas 36th Lost Battalion in the Vosges Mountains of France in 1944. There they suffered 800 casualties to rescue 211 Texans. The relocation concentration was challenged in court cases. In 1944, the Supreme Court upheld the relocation on the grounds of military necessity in the Korematsu case. In the Endo case, however, the Supreme Court denied that citizens could be detained once their loyalty had been established. FDR, however, delayed the release of the Japanese Americans. 1944 is an election year, and he fears that should he release these individuals, it would hurt his re-election campaign. Justice Frank Murray observed in dissent a melancholy resemblance to the Nazi treatment of Jews with the American treatment of the Japanese Americans. But Justice Hugo Black, really defining the public opinion, stated, "Hardships are a part of war, and war is an aggregation of hardships." But there is no denying that these were citizens, these were American citizens, denied their constitutional rights and herded into, this is FDR's words, concentration camps. Is it any wonder that Japanese Americans could remark, "Has the Gestapo come to America? Have we not risen in righteous anger at Hitler's mistreatment of the Jews? Then is it not incongruous that citizen Americans of Japanese descent should be similarly mistreated and persecuted?" Well, the end of this story is on August 10th, 1988, when President Ronald Reagan signed a bill apologizing for this entire episode and establishing a $1.25 billion fund for reparations. But can anything really make up for this period of time that the Japanese Americans suffered? I'd like to finish by quoting from Ms. Yoshie Togasaki's recollections of her wartime experiences in the Manzanar concentration camp in California. The rule was that everyone was evacuated who was at least 1/16 Japanese. I went to Manzanar. It was built from scratch by the military, and so it resembled a military place. Families had no privacy, and they were split apart. I was particularly upset with that aspect of it. A mother and children might be in one place, the father in another, and maybe teenage daughters would be thrown in with 4 or 5 bachelors. It was also a very dirty place. Manzanar at one time had been a pear orchard before Los Angeles took over all of the water rights of the area. When that happened, the orchard went dry and the place became very dusty. The wind would blow from the south, and then it would turn around and blow from the north. It was a very fine grip that covered everyone and everything. It was in the beds and in the food. We took showers, of course, but that was an unpleasant task. The showers were all open, and you can imagine how the women were embarrassed with that. Many of the older people had lived in the United States most of their lives, and the Nisi were full citizens. They were law-abiding people. They were hard-working. They loved the United States, and now they were treated like traitors. All of Manzanar was a stockade, actually a prison. We were in jail. There was barbed wire all around. There were great big watchtowers in the corners, and there were spotlights turned on during the night. You could not cross the boundaries unless you were authorized on a work detail or something. The guards carried rifles. There was a teenager at Manzanar who walked out into the desert one day. He was not running away. He just walked in plain sight. Who, in God's name, would try to escape in broad daylight? He was mentally deranged, and he got shot. They shot him in the back, so we all knew exactly where we stood. Now, before I turn this over to Darla, are there any questions that you'd like to ask me at this point?
Was there a camp in Montana as well?
The camp
by Hardin?
By Hardin, I believe you're right. I'm not totally sure. All I know about Montana is Fort Missoula, and that was 650 of the high-risk Japanese-American males who were interned here.
What date did they arrive there?
The date that they arrived here, do we know the exact date? It was sometime in the spring of 42, wasn't it?
It was late in December of 1941.
Oh, immediately after
Within
Pearl Harbor,
3
okay.
weeks from the bombing
Okay.
of Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Were there any POWs or other Germans at Fort Missoula?
Not to my knowledge.
No, yeah, just in the beginning, I do remember, we had around 300 German from Missoula. And now they decided to send it down to Bismarck.
Okay.
Yes, there was there was quite a contingent of them, and they used them during the summer of 1943 as firefighters. They were excellent firefighters. They were Germans. Incidentally, the Italians were awfully good firefighters too.
Okay, well that seems a nice way to segue into the next part. And Darla Brunner Wilson will now talk about Fort Missoula, the alien detention center, and the Italians. Darla.
Trying to make me really nervous, aren't you? Sure. As the year 1941 began, America tensely watched the events of the European War, which had been raging for 2 years in Europe. Although some Americans had already gone voluntarily to the aid of the Allies, the country as a whole still watched from the wings. The United States moved closer to the conflict, not only because of its economic ties with the Allies, but also because of the emotional ties with Great Britain and France. As was already stated, World War II was caused by World War I. America had already chosen sides, even though it had not officially joined the fight. The United States watched as Axis powers struck at Allied naval supply lines in Europe. And on March 30th, 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt committed one of the first overt acts against the Axis powers. He heard that a number of Axis merchant ships had been sabotaged in United States harbors, and he ordered their immediate seizure. He cited as a precedent for this action a 1915 action by President Wilson, and also the 1917 Espionage Act, which entitled the government to seize foreign merchant ships to prevent damage to other ships and harbor facilities within United States territories. The act, of course, was limited to emergency situations, and at this time, he ignored that limitation. The situation was tense, but by no means was it an emergency. During that first weekend, 69 Italian, German, and Danish ships were seized in ports from New York to the Panama Canal Zone. Peru, Mexico, and Cuba followed and seized ships in their harbors as an act of solidarity with U.S. policy. Roosevelt then instructed the FBI to examine the seized ships for sabotage. It was found that one of the 2 German ships and 20 of the 28 Italian ships did have some damage to them. They were crippled. A part of it was found, or it was implied, was ordered by the Italian naval attaché in Washington, D.C., and the State Department asked for his immediate recall to Italy. Italy and Germany, of course, demanded the release of their ships, but their protests were rejected. The ships were confiscated, repaired, and used by Allied forces. Roosevelt was more lenient with the Danish ships. He purchased for the United States, or on behalf of the United States, 39 Danish ships and transferred them to Great Britain under the Bridge of Ships policy for the transporting of war supplies. The Immigration and Naturalization Service then issued formal warrants accusing the German and Italian crews of violating immigration laws. No warrants were issued to the Danish crews. The Germans and Italians were alleged to have overstayed their statutory limit of 60 days, which was permitted to alien seamen. A small number of the seamen were charged with sabotage above the immigration warrant, and these men were to be imprisoned. The rest of the men were ordered to be held until deportation proceedings could be arranged. Within the next week, more ships were seized along the coast, and the crews from those ships were taken to immigration districts near the locations of their arrest. And these were along the east and the west coast, and also in Puerto Rico and the Panama Canal Zone. Boards of inquiry heard individual cases from the men. One of the ships that was seized was an Italian luxury liner, the Conte Biancomano, and my Italian isn't as that great. It was one of the largest ships that was seized, and it was seized in the Panama Canal Zone, and its crew was taken to Ellis Island. There were 512 persons on board that ship, including some women who worked as waitresses and shop girls. 9 of that crew was convicted of sabotage and imprisoned. I mentioned that ship in particular because the crewmen from that ship were eventually transferred to Fort Missoula. The violators of the immigration laws were to be sent home, but by this time the situation was impossible. There was an apparent need to establish facilities to house these seamen, and Missoula and other sites were considered. Why Missoula? What better place for a resort to keep our Italian guests? It was a beautiful vacation spot. It was near the mouth of the Bitterroot River, and it was in western Montana in a beautiful mountain valley. The fort was inactive at the time. The 4th Infantry from Fort Missoula had been transferred to Alaska, and all that remained was a 50-officer maintenance detail. The Civilian Conservation Corps had been centered at Fort Missoula during the Depression. It was part of Roosevelt's New Deal program, but it was winding down now that wartime preparations were being made. The site was isolated from military installations, so it posed little or no security risk. It was serviced by a Northern Pacific spur line, and the site included 4 barracks, a large recreation hall, a hospital, a fire station, and several small buildings that could be used as part of the detention camp. The 4 barracks could be used as dorms, which could accommodate up to 1,000 men if the beds were double-decked to utilize the 11 to 12-foot ceilings. An old quartermaster's unit building south of these barracks could be used to house the ship's officers and the officers' mess hall. The civilian staff could be housed in the officers' quarters. The post hospital here at Fort Missoula had recently been damaged by fire, and repairs were estimated at $26,000 because quite a few holes had been chopped in the roof during the firefighting. So a temporary sick bay could be set up in the barracks. The recreation hall was quite large. It had been built for the CCCs by the Works Progress Administration during the Depression. Inside the recreation hall was a basketball court, bowling alleys, a dance hall, a cocktail lounge, and a restaurant. But the fort needed a complete overhaul. The barracks needed to be cleaned, the streets fixed and graded, and the grass weeded and replanted. The Immigration Service began paperwork to borrow the fort from the War Department. Final transfer of fort property came at the end of April 1941 when 5 officials came to Fort Missoula to confer with the Army officials. The Army agreed to move its detachment out by July 1, 1941, and transfer much of its equipment to the Immigration Service. Chief Border Patrol Officer W.F. Kelly announced that Nick D. Collier, a Border Patrol officer from El Paso, Texas, would be in charge of the station and the detainees. Collier, upon arriving at Missoula, quickly assembled a staff to operate and provide security for the camp. His staff included a headquarters staff, a staff to take care of surveillance, supply, construction and maintenance, and a communications staff. The detainees, it was decided, would take care of kitchen labor, laundry labor, and they would maintain the fort and the camp, the internment camp. 2 officers of an Italian crew came to Fort Missoula to help Collier prepare for the main body. Their duties were to prepare lists of the men and their skills, decide on housing and hospitalization needs for the men, set up rules and internal discipline, and set up daily routines. Collier then only needed to order the necessary equipment, but he ran into a few problems. He was to set up in a consolidated mess, which for those of you who don't know, a mess is the eating facilities where the people would eat their meals, for 1,000 people. Remember that Collier was a Border Patrol officer and he didn't have the expertise to do this sort of job. He received help from George W. Humphrey of the Federal Correctional Institute of Sandstone, Minnesota, who loaned him reference materials and gave him instruction here at the fort. Collier also had trouble receiving a definite word from the Army regarding which equipment the Army would furnish to the camp. He was forced to use his imagination. The United States Forest Service Supply Division requisitioned items for the camp and agreed to exchange funds later. Collier received cots, mats, and bedding from CCC and U.S. Forest Service until shipments arrived later on. Laundry equipment came from Fort Peck in northern Montana. Hospital equipment, including lab, dental, surgical, and veterinary supplies, came from CCC camps all over the Pacific Northwest. Security for the fort was in the form of 25 Border Patrol guards, but another 65 Border Patrol guards could be brought from the Spokane district within a few hours' notice in case of an emergency. Local law enforcement promised to help out. This included the Missoula Police Department, Sheriff's Department, and the Highway Patrol. The Missoula Rod and Gun Club promised 75 expert riflemen within an hour's notice, and the American Legion and VFW promised help too. I have to stop here and emphasize that this additional personnel was never needed, but it fostered good public relations within the community anyway. Preparations for the camp were rapid, but the camp was not ready when the first detainees were to arrive. A temporary sick bay had been set up in one of the larger dorms, and it could handle all but surgical and venereal cases. A mess was set up in separate dorms until the large consolidated mess was finished. When that large mess hall was in operation, the areas could be used for indoor recreation and musical practice. 125 Italian men arrived 1 week before the main group to complete preparations. They installed a steel fence around the compound, prepared the dormitories, set up the mess facilities, and the laundry. The seamen to be housed at Fort Missoula had been transferred from ships to local county jails to the immigration service facilities. Most of them were held at Ellis Island or Seattle before coming to Missoula. On May 18, 1941, the first large group of Italians came, making a total of 610 men detained at Fort Missoula. Coordination was required to transport the detainees. After the first group, Collier asked for instructions to facilitate future transfers. The Immigration Service was given the use of a special train at Seattle to be used to transfer the men to Fort Missoula. It included a Pullman for the guards, 8 coaches, a dining car, and I read no bars on the windows. The transfer of the detainees to Fort Missoula was difficult for the Immigration Service, but except for its great length, it seemed to be no problem for the Italians. As the first group of Italians came into Missoula, it was, I've been told that several of them were overheard to exclaim, "Bella Vista," which in Italian means beautiful view, I think, doesn't it? That nickname, Bella Vista, was immediately adopted for the new city, and it stuck. The Missoulian carried a story about the internees at Fort Missoula with an excerpt of a letter one of the men sent back to Italy. This man said, "The journey from Ellis Island was one I had dreamed of for years, and then, in an extraordinary way, it came true. No one can complain about the guards. They treat us with every consideration." The men sent to Fort Missoula were Italian seamen and World's Fair employees. They were not enemy soldiers or prisoners of war. The camp soon surpassed its 1,000-man capacity when over 400 more Italians arrived by early June of 1941. More ships had been seized, more men were rounded up in New York lodging houses, bars, and cafes, and New York World's Fair workers who had overstayed their visas were brought to Fort Missoula. The present facilities were no longer sufficient. Collier requested 16 prefabricated dormitories for the men on May 23, 1941. Each barrack could hold 46 men and double the camp's capacity. He also asked for an additional mess hall. The new building wrote in one of his reports, "In the month of December 1942, there were a total of 1,404 sick calls. plus 375 days relief in the post-hospital. Considering there are only a total of 1,227 Italian detainees, the ratio between sick calls and population is most unreasonable. This is directly attributed to the fact that some of these men have been away from their homes and families for 3 or 4 years, incarcerated in prisons and detained in camps. The cases of neurosis and other neuronic illnesses are increasing to startling proportions. If these men are not furnished more work and liberties, I dread to think what the conditions will be 1 year from now. Brown also reported that in addition to the 3 previous mental cases, he was more aware of men with various types of mental disorders, including 3 suicide attempts. He stressed the disorders were caused by depression, worry, anxiety, and lack of activity. The hospital was used by many to relieve boredom or express their discontent. It was said that some of them would wander in for attention or with undefinable complaints. When the camp opened, several were under the impression that they would be returned to Italy if they had physical disabilities. Several had not been transferred from Ellis Island to Fort Missoula. Maybe they had been sent home. When it was found that no transfer was possible, use of the hospital fell off. The Immigration Service sought to correct the problem of the men's activity by allowing the interns to work for wages in tasks beyond their normal task duties, or normal camp duties. At Bella Vista, a barber shop was set up. Men did tailoring, leather work, and boots, and there was also a mechanic shop within the camp to service the townspeople's automobiles. The Immigration Service arranged for the release of some of the men to work in town, doing landscaping, painting, or odd jobs for some of the Missoula families. These men were picked up in the morning and returned in the evening by the families who hired them. The Florence Hotel's 2 top chefs had gone to war. 2 of the Italian chefs were hired that were chefs on an ocean liner. Mary Bell, who's a Missoula resident, supervised these people. She reported that their conduct was always excellent and they always acted in a professional manner. They ordered food, planned menus, and prepared the meals for the Florence Hotel and received the same wages as the chefs that were drafted. These men lived in town, but they reported to the fort once a week and they were subject to spot checks by the Border Patrol at any time. Mary Bell also made monthly reports to the Immigration Service, but she said their conduct was always highly professional. The Florence Hotel then hired 8 to 10 more Italians to work as busboys and room cleaners, and the palace followed. The American Crystal Sugar Company was a major employer of the men. Arthur Dayshaw managed the beet field operation in western Montana, and so he had a lot of one-to-one contact with these men. He reported that there was a drain of manpower by the draft, and in 1942, the sugar company was in a bind. An experimental camp was set up by the Immigration Service to ease the labor shortage. It was in the Townsend Valley, and it was manned by 18 anti-fascists from Fort Missoula who lived in an abandoned hotel in Townsend. They brought their own cook and supplies, and they were accompanied by an immigration guard. Dayshaw said the men seemed to be glad to be out of the camp, which they described as an insufferable bore. They were pleased with the physical exercise. They said it was enough to be out of the fort, and they seemed to have no desire to explore the surrounding area. An Immigration Service representative from Philadelphia inspected the site shortly, and the sugar beet company was told that they could hire more men, even fascists. So a camp was set up in Stevensville for 40 men, and these men lived in an old butcher shop, and another one for 30 men in Frenchtown. These men who worked for the sugar company were paid cash on a scale that was set by the Beet Growers Association and by the U.S. government. There were problems with paperwork, and there were some additional expenses. But with the labor shortage, the company could not keep up productions without the help of the Italians. Other employers of the Italians were the Post Hospital at Fort Missoula, St. Patrick's Hospital and the Northern Pacific Hospital in Missoula, and the Columbus Hospital in Great Falls, where the men worked as orderlies. During the summer of 1943, men cruised timber in 6 U.S. Forest Service lumber camps in Idaho. And as someone said earlier, they also fought fires. Those who worked most closely with their employees were most fully admitted into the community. The men who worked for the Florence Hotel, as I said before, lived in town, and they were included socially with the other employees. The beet field workers tended to associate with the community as a group, and a lot of that might have been because of the language barrier. Deshaw said that he felt the men were accepted and appreciated by the community, who realized that there was a serious labor problem. Men who worked individually for farmers and townspeople were part of the family. They went to town and to church with the families they worked for, and it's assumed that they met people in the community. Those left behind, though, at the forts had limited contact with the public. There were concerts, plays at the fort, or sometimes at the Elks Club in Missoula. One concert was reported by the Missoulian to have been attended by 1,000 people, and a string quartet played. But the Missoulian said there was little one-to-one contact between the Italians and the Missoula community. Eventually, the men were allowed to go shopping in town or go to movies if they were accompanied by a guard. Security loosened in time, and a few men even had girls in town. Curfew was at 10 o'clock, and some of the men came in late. They had to account for themselves, but there was no real disciplinary action. The extent of interaction between the Italians and the community depended on the language. Most of the men spoke little or no English, and so it was hard for them to speak with the people in Missoula, who for the most part knew no Italian. For a short time, there were no phone calls allowed at Bella Vista because the guards couldn't monitor the conversations. The medical officer, Frank Brown, said that he had a problem communicating with the Italians to detect what their physical complaints were. Life basically was unchanged for 3 years, but not without occasional incidents. There were several personal clashes, but they were between staff and Italians. One of the incidents happened when Dr. Smiley, who was a medical officer in 1942, sparked a fight after he posted a letter that was written by an anti-fascist, which contained matter offensive to the fascists. The letter writer was searched out and attacked, and other anti-fascists were too. Fighting quickly spread, and an emergency squad of guards had to disperse the group with a canister of gas. 13 were taken into custody, and 5 of the men were injured enough to require hospitalization. Personnel action was warranted against Dr. Smiley, but since he was near retirement, he was placed on the inactive list and replaced. Another incident happened earlier when a patrol inspector who was acting as a supply officer caused a near riot by his high-handed methods. Surprisingly, there was little reaction to news of the United States war with Italy. Although the men didn't respond to the change in international affairs, life at the camp was affected. Within hours of the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the United States' subsequent declaration of war, the FBI made rapid, systematic arrests of Japanese nationals along the west coast of the United States. These Japanese Americans were considered dangerous to the national security because they kept ties with their homeland. Within 3 weeks, by late December of 1941, there were more than 600 Japanese American men at Bella Vista, increasing its population by half. There was stricter control after this because public opinion about the Japanese was near hysteric. Because of public pressure, the guard force was doubled from 25 to 50 border patrol, and 12 civilian guards were brought in. This changed the daily routine for the Italians because they had separate housing, and some of the areas were now off limits to them. The Italians and the Japanese, of course, had little in common. They didn't mix even when and where it would have been possible. Lyle Slade noted that the two groups passed each other day after day on constant walks, never passing to greet one another or even look at each other. Once at war with Italy, Germany, and Japan, the Justice Department distinguished between those men interned before the war awaiting deportation, which included the Italians, and those picked up as enemy aliens. 30 Italian men were picked up as the 600 Japanese were, and they were also brought to Fort Missoula under tight security until their hearings. Some dangerous aliens were picked up in Montana, but the German and Italian populations were not evacuated like the Japanese. The evacuation of Japanese included anyone of Japanese ancestry, not just aliens. The Montana Japanese were moved to Wyoming and Utah relocation camps, not to Fort Missoula. It's odd that while the country rounded up enemy aliens and Japanese, a few Italian interns were paroled, relocated, or repatriated. Between September and November 1941, some were taken to Ellis Island for reprocessing. Some went to Italy, and others were released on bond. It was reported that some of these men were who were seamen were placed on ships to work. But this wasn't a normal practice. Most of the men remained at Fort Missoula until the spring of 1944. In fall of 1943, the Allied liberation of southern Italy began the release of the Italians at Fort Missoula. Early attempts to release these men failed. On March 21, 1944, 64 seamen arrived at Ellis Island for release to work on the ship the SS Saturnia. Unexpectedly, most of the men refused to board the ship for various reasons. Some of them said they were fascist and this would cause reprisals to their families, or they were anti-fascist and it could cause reprisals. Some of them said they were unfit because of various reasons. Two of the men who did finally board were found to really be unfit, and so they were turned away. Of the 64 flown from Fort Missoula to New York City at considerable cost and effort, only 14 boarded, but 2 more changed their minds and boarded the next day. Although plans for the placement of the soon-to-be paroled men was not complete, the Immigration Service transferred large numbers to Ellis Island from Fort Missoula. From March 25th to early April 1944, 299 Italians went to Ellis Island. Only 1 wanted to go home to southern Italy. 24 were willing to work in the United States, and the remainder, who were unprepared, became a huge problem for the officials. The problems were housing and how to process them out. Lack of work was not a problem. Requests from businesses eager to employ the men came from all over the United States. When the men were released from Fort Missoula, they were paid wages for the work they had performed at the camp. But they were no longer classified as detainees, so their situation changed. Their status at Ellis Island was even more confusing and complicated. They could not be forced to work, but they couldn't be denied their rights to freedom either. They hadn't been placed anywhere, so again, they were guests of the Immigration Service. On April 21, 1944, new orders came from the Attorney General. New informal hearings with each man were to be held to determine whether the men were to be paroled, repatriated, or continued to be interned. An important factor in their release was their political feelings. Those who were pro-fascist were to be held or repatriated to Italy. The others were to be paroled. By the end of April 1944, Bella Vista was empty, but many were still waiting at Ellis Island for their release. Some of the men were later placed in, took jobs in Spokane for the Northern Pacific Railway. Some went to Seattle and worked for the Seattle Light and Power Company. We don't know where a lot of the others went. By the end of 1944, it appears that Ellis Island had processed all of the men. The Immigration and Naturalization Service, considering that it was a government agency, accomplished fairly well a huge task under difficult conditions. However, there is some criticism. The hurried transfer to Ellis Island in 1944 created complicated problems on the other end. Men were put through unnecessary delays and more confinement. It appears at times that nothing was done. The men were left to entertain themselves, often for up to 6 months. Looking back, though, it is obvious that the men working for the Immigration Service were aware of the delicate nature of this situation. Nick Collier was organized and meticulous. He brought the camp to an operating condition. His reports show care and personal interest in developing a livable home for the men here. Others, like Medical Officer Frank Brown, showed the same interest and regard. There are questions that are still not answered today, and we're working on those answers. What about the men? What happened after their release? How many of them stayed? We know several of them stayed in the area or came back. 2 of them are here today. Where did the men go? How did the time at Fort Missoula affect their lives? And Missoula, how did the people in Missoula react to the establishment of a camp in their town, especially before war had even been declared? How did it affect the community economically? And did the townspeople experience a change in their attitudes towards war and towards foreigners? And then the big picture. Did the United States really have a right to hold these men? What difference would it have made if they would have been sent home in the beginning? Why was it diplomatically impossible to return them? What was the relationship between Fort Missoula and the other camps in the United States? Whatever the answers, the internment at Fort Missoula is one of the most interesting chapters and one of the most unforgettable in its history. May we never forget. Thank you.
What you did to this research?
I'm sorry, what?
Research.
Research? I got my research from oral histories from the Mansfield Library that were done with Lyle Slade and with Mary Bell, and then with Arthur Dayshaw, and also a paper that was written by Susan Bushell about the internment camp, and also from your book.
Well, my book I did, because what I didn't remember, I was over there up to 1943. But he gave so many details over there that I forgot about. So I didn't know anything about it. So it's good. I mean, it has some.
What's that?
I never heard it called Bella Vista.
Didn't you?
And we lived there.
No, I didn't either, and I worked there
It's Calare, by the way, not
She said she never heard it called Bella Vista the whole time she was here. Did you, Ben, refer to it as Bella Vista?
Because I don't think it was well advertised about, The only one thing was known about Bella Vista was the water from Fort Missoula. Because if you ask people about Bella Vista, what they don't think it knows. Bella Vista is beautiful. This is the reason, like you say, when they arrive, after spending so much time, after spending so much time in Ellis Island, you arrive over here, summertime, mountain, nice fresh air, not like it today.
Yes.
1950, we were used to, the air was nice, clean. Just like myself, when I arrived in Missoula was in July 1941. Yeah, but don't forget, I give you some things about it. Talk about money, I never get any money from immigration myself.
You didn't get any money?
I used to work at St. Patrick Hospital. I worked down the Sugar Beet, and but I got paid when I was working the railroad. See, but anyway, but one thing you talk about over there. But I spent a 30 days in Miami County Jail. 30 days. And believe it or not, the three people that was where we was in four fella. I think the prison was about 36 people inside. The three people that was with me, today, two, and in Tallahassee, and the chamber, gas chamber, one got 40 years. I'm not just still in prison yet. Believe it or not, I have all the name of these people. Yeah. See, I was over there after I come over in the United States myself. Yeah, it was 1940. And I come over for the opening of the New York World Fair. I was working in the Italian Pavilion restaurant. I was singing beside working. And, after the closure of the New York World Fair in October, I had no way to go back because I have only 6 month visa, special visa to work in the Italian Pavilion. And after the war in Italy started in June, and all the transportation was all shut. And but they let us, and I remember when the police gave me some more time to, and they let me move to Miami, Florida. And when I arrived in Miami, Florida, same day when I arrived, I got job over there. I was working there Fontainebleau Hotel. And until about, I think it was about May. Then one day, I don't remember just like it was today, the FBI come over and ask me, so you are Mr. Chipoliti or Chipoliti? I say, yes, so he said, come over. And I said, where? I used to be in shirt. I said, Miami. I said, wait a minute, I want to dress up. No, you'll be back right away. Anyway, brought me in jail, brought me down to everybody been in Miami? No, nobody but anyway, yeah, but the jail is still over there, by the way. At the time, it was the oldest, the tall building in Miami, and they called that that country. And I remember you have two jail. One was I was the 19th story, and the 20th story was all the German. There were about 80 German over there from the name of the boat over there, so cargo boat. It used to be a name. It was Arauca. It was an electric boat, no engine, electric. And anyway, the German was upstairs, and the Italian was the only one. And I was all to this with these people thing. I do remember thing. And you have the kangaroo court, you know, you hear about. And I do remember to say something I used to sing. And about in afternoon, they used to say, "You're an Italian?" I say, "Yes." I stand up over there, start to sing Sole Mio. And every day for 30 days, you know, I was giving a concert. Sole Mio, Sorrento, La Paloma. And he was a Cuban guy, he used to play guitar. But I do remember the time I arrived in jail. The guy took my shoes out and my stock. And my stock disappeared. And they asked somebody, I can guess, how's the young fellow? Oh, nice looking guy, young fellow. So I was 23, 24, maybe. And finally my stock he arrived with a bunch of cigarette butt, onion, you know, just a bunch of chunky stuff, you know. I wrote this down, this thing over there, you know. I said, well, and I remember the jail was maybe it was about just about so big. You have a 2-bunk bed, you know, iron, no mattress, no blanket, nothing, you know. And I remember they have a toilet and lavabo over there to the side and just a drop inside. And pretty soon he asked for, asked the guy the rations. So it was good. It's okay. And I still have it today. I like to show you. By the order of President Delano Roosevelt and the President John Batista of Cuba, we are set you in her, but I still have just about the thing. I put in some of the, yeah. And I was over there for about 30 days. I from over there, I sent me down to Ellis Island. The thing is that when they sent me to Ellis Island, I had this, the German, the captain, the German boat come over with this butler, and the butler speaks Italian very good. He come over and said, "Hi, Hitler." I said, "Tired with you," I said, "No." And "Hi, Hitler." And he asked me if I was supposed to go with him in Ellis Island. I said, "Well, it's okay. Better to go to Ellis Island than over here." And anyway, I do remember when I was in Ellis Island, when we arrived in New Jersey, you have the what do you call, the Coast Guard. And he's all this tail over the machine gun. I remember one guy over there just to push me out. And I said to him, a dirty word in Italian. And he said to me, he said, "Paesano." So what are you doing here? He was thinking I was a German, you know. And anyway, he said, "Come on, we get a cup of coffee." Anyway, I stayed in Arizona for about 40 days. I was over there. I mean, 30 to 40 days. And but you know what? For 40 days, you know, we never been out. We was in this big room. Yeah, I bet you we all room is about 400 or 500 people in one room. We have a 3-top bed, you see. Yeah, because and it was sort of when I arrived in Fort Missoula. I mean, it was much better, especially in the beginning. See, like our group of the New York World Fair, we used to have the best chef, you know, and we used to have our home kitchen, you know, we used to have everything, so food, anything, you know, and after, like I say, we started organize a group, singing group, but I was singing quite a bit, and I sing quite a bit, many times down to the Herc Temple. Yeah. With the orchestra. And I, from Missoula, I used to be either with the theater. And I used to be the old lady in the Sicily, no woman. I was the old lady. My best man used to be the young lady. Yeah, yeah. And you know the thing is either today, the dress that we used to use, it was belong to my wife, mother. Yeah, my wife, mother, yeah. And see, we used to use, because my father-in-law used to have a time. Well, I think so many people know me around here, I'm pretty sure. I have a grocery store for 100 years. Yeah, I had the best food market in Montana, the only Italian market over there. You know, or Italian, well, I know only Italian food, most of any kind, you know. But for basically 30 years, it was about over 35 years, I think I'm still over there, because what was happening, after I come over from, after Fort Missoula, I organized a group, by the way, to go work in the sugar beet. We was about 8. And we started, where with the Arthur over there, I know Arthur said that. I think it's you are one of the first guy I think I meet in Fort Missoula, right? Yeah, we were to speak French all the time, right? Yeah, the only thing they understand me when I was talking French. Every time I was talking English, they didn't understand me. We was talking French all the time, you know. I work on the sugar beet. That was kind of funny. We used to make it. Now let me see. I used to make $1 a ton. And the damn thing, sugar beet, it was sometimes was more smaller than this thing here. You know, we used to take plenty of work. In there one place in the Gold Creek, it was so damn big, long one. We used to take a lunch because we used to go from here over there, have a lunch at 12 o'clock. I said, no way to go back to where we start. Because we was need to go. Over there, first I think I worked first down in Mullen Road someplace. And I remember talk about the police who used to come over. We used to have the guy from the guard. Finally, after 3 days, I remember I went down to the supervisor and said, listen, nobody want to go work. He said, why? Because we don't like the guard. I said, that's what you need to do, just to bring us up 9 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, come over 5 o'clock, and that's it. And we used to, that's all 5 o'clock, we used to come over, take it back in Fort Missoula. Anyway, after for over there, we went down to Rock Creek working. And over there, we was all for ourselves. It was about 12 people, yeah, just we had no guard, no supervised at all, no. And we used to work over there. After season was over, I have a job down to St. Patrick Hospital. I was orderly over there for a year. I used to make $30 a month. You know, $30. The only thing I used to make some extra money was I used to save, you know. So I used to say, how much you charge? $5? No, $1, I used to say. $1 was quite a bit in 1941. And I used to call my wife, listen, I make it $3. I can take you for a steak dinner tonight, you know. And after from over there, finally, I was getting tired over there because I used to do all the nurse work. I used to give iPod, I used to everything. And I was trying to go to school like a nurse over there. The sister said, no, wait, you are an alien, you are so and so. And I quit. I started to work on the railroad. Yeah, I worked on the railroad for about. So you know how much I used to. Let me say so many. No, you're too young to understand. I don't know because you know, I'm 80 years old. No, not yet. 79 in 1 month. And I used to work. I used to in the track. I used to make 35 cents an hour. 35 cents an hour. And you know what? Sometimes about 10 o'clock, I used to get a cup of coffee and 2 donuts. It cost me 35 cents. See, 1 hour work. I worked for the track a while, for like quite a bit. I don't know. And after, change, you know, rail and tire and the spark, you know, all these things. And after, I moved to the, what do you call, sender pit. You never know what the sender pit is. So many old people maybe, yeah, you know, the sender pit, shovel or sand, you know, from the, clean the damn thing, engine. And after from over there, the stationary, shovel coal. The stationary, there's no more over there, see. And after then the coal dock and the sand house. But you know, it was a tough work. There was no easy thing to do. Anyway, finally when the war was over, I remember I said, now, the reason is too, see, I was over there, I was, what do you call, essential work, see. Because every 6 months I used to get the greeting from Uncle Sam. You're supposed to be in Long Island, such a day. And I remember I used to go down to the roadmaster. I said, here I have it. He said, oh, give it to me. He said, in the United States, don't need any men. You have too many. We need people over here work to make this thing keeping going. You know, every single 6 months I got he used to say, okay, and after when the war was over, I quit. I said, that's enough for a railroad. And I was just ready to move to Spokane. And but after my father-in-law used to have a grocery around here in Missoula, in Moody Street, in Alder, Moody. He asked me to go work. Oh, besides, not a thing, I got married. See, everybody was in Fort Missoula thing. I got married I was married in 1943. So just about 48, 49 years now.
You got married when you were in the prison?
After. No, I met my wife in church, by the way. Just about 49 years like now. But just around Christmas time. And he asked me to go sing church, and I said, okay, I joined the chorus. My wife, she used to sing. She was the choir secretary, and the sister said, Alfredo sings, Adeste Fidel. Adeste Fidel. E so, e si commuove, so, che bella voce, beautiful voice. I still married with her. After she still me sing. And after, like I said, I started to work with my father. You know, and after when he died, I take over the business, and after I move where I am now. And like I said, it's a long, long time. But the one thing that I remember, like it today is the 7th of December. And 50 years ago, the 7th of December was, I think it was in Sunday. I do remember it was in Sunday because I had the okay to leave for Missoula for New York, because somebody put $500, what you call bond. And the time over there, we used to have it was the night, I used to have some program, you know. I don't remember if it was a singing or acting, I don't remember. And I said, oh, well, one day more, what difference is it? And I remember I asked the supervisor, I said, you think I stay an extra day from Missoula, you know. I was already 18 months, but I said, okay, you can leave it tomorrow. And then until the day after, over there, I was ready with my suitcase in the gate over there, Pearl Harbor, no more, out. Yeah, see, I was lucky. See, I told my wife many times, I said, see, because if I was leaving today at Pearl Harbor, over there, if it was not Pearl Harbor, maybe, you know, she'd be married with somebody else because she was pretty good. Okay, that's enough for me. If you want to ask us some questions. Oh, you know one thing, you know that thing you people don't know about, Berto remember, you know, at Fort Missoula, I remember, you know, Berto, when they used to give us a pound of coffee, 5 pounds of sugar, and the more sugar a couple was know what to do. And but one thing is the thing, we used to make our own booze. You know, every time you ask, what do you want for dessert? Dry raisin. You know, dry raisin, you can make a good, really good liquor, you know. Finding somebody all the time, somebody, the guy find somebody was half drunk, so on. No raisin. Oh, okay, prune. And I said, no prune, okay, fig, you know. And they finding no more, and after the end, they said, well, for now on, apple. We used to make a wine with apple, you know, but we used to do it. But I mean, so like I said, for Missoula, the most of the sad thing it was because we never know. He was over there, you never know what's happened in Italy. Nobody knows what's happened with the family. You know, I never know about my family over there for 5 years. Yeah, I was only 5 years after thing. I remember I lost a brother, so on, in the war. But I don't like war. I don't think the war is no good. I wish that people stay in peace over there, enjoy themselves. Right?
Alfredo, did the men in the camp, the Italian men, did they feel did they feel fortunate to be here and not, and have the war go by them, or did they want to get back to Italy?
Well, I don't know. It's a very, very song, yes. Yeah, because I do remember saying many of those people think after it was sent back in Italy, because I remember he used to write to me, he says, too bad I'll be back in Fort Missoula, because the life was much, much better over here than over there. But this was after the war, the chaos over there, everything was upside down, you see. And but I'm pretty certain some people, you know, the only thing is, what if it was to Missoula? Only bunch of men, no women. Oh, well, no, that was a nice place, no woman. You know, just a man, like a Berto. And so on, you know. Hey, Berto, come on, do you want to say something yourself?
Well, when
I said too much already.
Well, all right. The matter of fact,
She said everything anyway.
She said everything.
You know.
The only thing I can say, I mean, okay, here is.
Oh, he wrote all about Berto over there. He wrote a nice book about Fort Missoula. Yeah.
I cannot say too much.
He's our
I am the first one
writer.
at Fort Missoula. I the one that put the fence around. Here is the
Oh, you see. If I was not, he was putting the fence around, believe it or not, and I was picking with you at the top.
And
He was the guy who put the fence.
this was 1941 to 1943. That's the only thing I could say, I mean. And I wrote it down, there is no food, no water, nothing. And for me, the Fort Missoula was a nice place, and it still is a nice place. As you said, few incidents happened between fascist and communist, but was very little. I mean, I don't know where you made it. That
I was not over there at the time when this happened because I was
the thing I published this book, and I am going to do the second edition because I came back, as I told, in 1966 from California, and I came here at the university, and I met on the campus a few people, and they introduced me. This guy was prisoner of Fort Missoula.
No, I need to go for Missoula now because you were used to. Let me see. You were used to do all the stage. You remember?
And,
yeah, he used to do. He's a
I
good
felt-
painter. He used to do all the stages.
I felt very bad
Yeah.
when the people introduced me as a prisoner of Fort Missoula. I felt very bad. And then, so then I decided, then I read some other brochures and something, not the prisoner were incarcerated, this and that. So I questioned the girls, the one who made the research. He said, well, I have to sell the book. In order to sell the book, I have to make something, you know, of the Italian. I just like to say, well, they always mention this mafia, they're mafia. I have to say it. This happened already at University of Washington, Seattle. I was there. So I said, well, I decided to publish this book, this as it is. And I put the pictures in black and white, then you can see all of the activities. Then you have an idea. But still, you know, still you have in mind, I mean, some people, they are prisoner of Fort Missoula. Fort Missoula is a very nice place, and I like it. It's the reason that they put the Bella Vista, because it's a very beautiful and nice site.
Yeah, it was a nice Bella Vista over there, but just like a woman, Berto, when you put a bird in the cage, even if it's a golden bird, a golden cage, you put it down to your poor bird, you like to fly. You know, so Bella Vista, all right, but you have no way to go outside the door.
To remember.
Question for you. Maybe you can help us here. I work on the staff here at the museum, and you presented a couple issues came up that I think maybe we're not clear about. At least I'm not, and I'm down at the front desk answering questions. So help me. There were prisoners of war here, however, correct? There were.
Oh,
some,
no, it was a prison, no.
Some Germans.
No, it was no prisoner of war.
No
No, it was
prisoner of
all, what do you call it? Intern. It was all.
Internees
Yeah. It was no,
So
yeah.
not prisoners of war.
No.
There is a lot of confusion in this business. There was no prisoner of war, and the people are confused. They don't know how to distinguish between a war prisoner and an internee, and then there are some other under immigration law. See what I mean? There was no prisoner of war. I mean, it could not be possible. But the people, they don't know. I mean, there are a lot of confusion about it. As there is, here I put you in my picture as a GI, and here is. See, I was in the service. This was because I put the 1941 to 1943 because I left. After that, I don't know anything about what happened. Now, she made the research, and she put a lot of, she decided a lot of things, I mean, it was true over there. But I think I had, now, to go back 50 years ago, I think I had a good time. Except we had...
Good time?
Well, the women, that's the only thing, I mean, we miss because it was no women.
You are not interested in women, so this is the reason you have a good time.
No, I am interested in women more than that. The situation, you know, confused and this and that, so forth. And when I left the camps, I went to Columbia Hospital in Great Falls with the other people, you know, some other group that were working at Great North, you know, and please, I'm in a different place.
You know, Berto, we are lucky that we are here. We can say, God bless America, and we are here. Now, that's the only thing I can say. Because I don't know where I'll be today.
Well,
when are you going to retire?
What the hell? What I retire? I don't have any money. I need to keep on working all the time. I'm working over there since I don't know. I was born to work.
also, I want to show you, now, those are the true, the true book. Those are the true book that I wrote. This one, in all my book, there is no footnote because I write as I remember. See what I mean? I don't do research at university. I could go, you know, but this other book is, I still have another 4 copies of this, 39 4 copies of the freedom culture. And he's up to 1939 because I left Genova 1939 and I went in South America, Valparaiso. And when we come back, we stopped at, we were stopped at the Panama Canal. And no one knew that the Panama Canal or the police, the water bottom, was held by the United States Fruit Company. See? So we stayed over there for more or less 9 months on a tropical.
Look, all the bananas.
Now, I didn't put that. See, the reason I didn't put that the way when the troops came and assaulted us, and we were, you know, without just to have a good time at the band, the play over there, and sunshine, and all the kind of things. So suddenly the troops came, the bayonet, this and that, and we were just like that. With a few minutes, you know, we have to leave the boat. And from that was, I didn't write about that because it was not necessary, but time of war, many things happen, so it's very difficult. I was in Korea, and I saw a lot of things, so you cannot say anything about it. That's the reason I didn't put this book, you know. But that's, I didn't like. So from there, then I came, I was abroad here in the United States, and then, as a matter of fact, I took even the trip. They put me on a Leonard Wood transport troop from New York to Panama Canal. So that's it. I came here and I put the fence, and here is this is the boat. This is the boat. I have this, no, I don't have this boat. I have another boat that we built inside the fort, you know, erects. This is a Conde Biangamel. This was 500, she said, 12 people crew, you know. And the other boats there, they were cargo boat. with 20 people, 25, 12 people, you stay out for 2 months, 3 months, because it goes from one place to another. But this boat was a cruiser boat and a passenger boat, you know, and it goes from one place to another just like that, you know. That's the reason. And so when we came here, we built was this big house, log, very beautiful, and there was we built the theater, you know, and there were many things, you know. And I built the scenery and the stage. I mean, you can see the book. I mean, very well.
I used to build and I used to act.
So all of those things we did because the campus was. Now I remember what she said. There was some incident between fascists and communists. There were a few communists. The ideology, you know, there were a few. Those were from one from North Italy and the other one from around the Genoa. They were for a few. Because there were the young people too, you remember. The young one was 14 years old. And all the rest of the group were 17, 18, 20. Those, you know, they were...
Yeah, you remember the...
So they were a different group, you know what I mean? Because this boat is a tourist boat that brings a lot, you know, artists within soccer, as he said, everything. The other boat, they were just a peanuts boat.
You know,
Well, I mean,
you know, it was getting along between the... See, the Conte Biancamano was the elite, you know, and all the other cargo were just, They
Well,
used to cargo all the time when they used to play soccer. You know, used to have the Biancamano
So
and
that's,
all the used to call the carrete. Carrete mean wheelbarrow, used to call, because they were small. They used to have
See,
all the time.
there
Used
is
to have
no,
a soccer game between the two teams.
those, then nothing. All of those boats were on east part. All the youngsters were drafted with A1 mark. So if Anglo-Sim would like a draft them, pick up those boys as they did, they took the boy and sent it to the army too. And there was one guy with me at Great Falls. He took even the lawyer not to go in the army, but the FBI came and picked up the FBI, the MP. They picked up him, and when they brought him in the army, because it was registered A1. All us who were registered A1. So in case of Anglo-Sim, you know, needed, you know, personnel, because you are on a Navy, you know, cargo, whatever it is, and they use you. That's the reason. I mean, they are a lot, but you know, you cannot. As far as concern intern of the Fort Missoula, I think we had a very good time. I mean, there is nothing, I mean, except the women. But the women we had, the women, the girl we have, sales girls and other leaders, you already mentioned it, and well, they shift. Even the medical team, we were a medical team, a nurse, and all, they shift in New York. I don't know what happened, you know, because I left in 1943 and I didn't know anything about it. But I was the first one to go there and pull the fence around.
Was about
Then, as far as concerned, I mean, the patrol become very friend. They wished the tower and this and that. You know, the first they told, as Dr. Brunner said, the failure, because then it was not necessary to have the patrol. Was not necessary, you know. So there is a lot of things. Yeah.
I think we'll just take one question here.
I want to clarify something that my mother told me as a child. We grew up about a mile from here, and I was born during the war. And my dad was off working in the shipyards. And I had a brother and sister that were 4 or 5, and I was a baby. And I know my mother was in fear of the internees here. And they had a siren that would go off if someone escaped. And I know as a little child, I remember my mother telling me that when that siren would go off, she'd put me in a cardboard box and put me under her bed. And
I don't remember something like that.
Wait a minute.
now I also have a lot of people who told me that they had the Italians come and have dinner in their home with them and work on their ranch. And I don't understand
No.
my mother's fear.
No, wait a minute. This thing happened after. They maybe happened 1944 when they decide to put all the American, what do you call?
The
Army,
Army,
this, and they have a plenty trouble with these people.
It was
Yeah, yeah.
disciplinary
After.
barracks.
Disciplinary barracks.
For
yeah.
American Army
Yeah.
people, right?
Yeah, it was-
Okay.
yeah.
And that's
I don't
when
think.
they
it was,
Oh, okay,
no.
so it wasn't,
I
it
never
wasn't the
hear the
Italians,
siren.
it was the,
No,
it was
no.
the American Army,
Disciplinary barracks.
When it goes to the Italian here, first of all, none of those used to speak perfect American language. First, second, to be in Montana, if you want to reach New York, how you go? I mean,
well,
to
that's what I
reach.
couldn't understand, why.
No one will escape from that. No one will escape from the Fort Missoula.
Okay, well, I want to thank you all for coming. I certainly want to thank our two guests for showing. I think we realized that it was pretty much Bella Vista except for the women. Excuse me.
There's a point or two that should be cleared up, namely relative to prisoners of war. We had some Nazis from the Romeo's Africa Corps in the Bitterroot Valley. They were excellent help. They were thoroughly disciplined, and we never had a minute's trouble with those fellows. They were under military surveillance, and you could take them to a field, show them a field. They'd look it over and tell you what they wanted for the field, depending on the condition, weeds and whatever. And then you could go off and forget it, because it would be done absolutely perfect, 100%. We were grateful to have those fellows. We were also grateful for having the Italian detainees. That was a definition that was given by the Geneva Convention. And of course the Japanese people out of the relocation camps. Of all the experiences that I had with this whole business during World War II, I was very close to it. The things that happened that I saw at the Stockton Relocation Center, and the one, of course, at Tule Lake, where they had on the Oregon-California border, they had some of the young incorrigibles there that were a little tough. We never got into those fellows. We got some out of Fresno as well. Those people who they had to volunteer. There wasn't any coercion whatsoever. There was a lot of red tape that had to do with reports and what have you that we had to go. But there's one incident that happened at the Stockton Center that I shall never forget. It was on a Sunday morning, and a fellow named Wertheimer, who was a government man, and another fellow named of Chase, and myself, and Larry McDonald, who is the agricultural agent for the Northern Pacific Railroad. So on this Sunday morning, we went out to meet these people and to discuss with them with a Japanese interpreter, which we had with us. And during the process of watching this business of the people in the compound, before we started any discussions, there was a little troop of Boy Scouts within the compound who were marching there with our flag and our little banners and their uniforms. And that scene within that compound, with those scouts marching with our flag, guarded in with these fellows on four corners, was an experience that haunts me to this day, because it was so unreal. It was so convoluted that it was very hard to stomach. Other than that, I must tell you that we had some very fine experiences with the people at Fort Missoula, Bert Fraser, Thomas Bayless, William Moore, and of course the name Collier. We call it, I don't know whether they're talking about the same fellow or not, but we call it Collier.
Collier, yeah, Collier, because they have French name, yeah.
Mr.
Yeah, Collier.
Captain Fraser was the best captain.
Yes, he was a good man.
Good man.
Now I want to tell you something that happened there while we were working with these gentlemen in the beet fields. We got an order one day from Mr. Fraser that we were going to lose our help, namely the Italian people we had in our beet field. Well, that was most disturbing information, I'll tell you, because we depended on these people. That was all we had. Sugar was strategic, and aside from that, this was a desperate situation. We had this crop out there. Who in the world was going to do the work? So, of course, some of the people at Fort Missoula were most anxious to get away from the beet field because of the difficulty of the surveillance that had to do with in and out and all of that, and the collection of money that I was responsible for. And I did things in that way, in respect that could have given me a round-trip ticket to Leavenworth with about a 10-year stopover, because it's absolutely illegal for anybody except the finance officer to handle money. But in order to get through the red tape, I had to do that. Now to get back to what happened on the beet fields with Fraser and his edict, who got his orders from Philadelphia, from Mr. Leclerc, to move out. And we were going to go to the Northern Pacific Railroad. Well, what are we going to do? It so happened at that time that Senator Wheeler was vacationing at Glacier National Park. He had a summer cabin. So we wrote Senator Fraser, or Senator Wheeler, a letter, a night letter, telling him, well, you should have seen things happen then. The orders came down from Philadelphia, from Mr. Leclerc, that you're not going to move one single Italian out of those beet fields, not one. Well, that was upsetting. It was upsetting to Mr. Bayless especially, and Mr. Fraser, who were embarrassed. But I must tell you that hadn't it been for Senator Wheeler, we would have lost our votes. So that's enough of that. And I'll tell you that I will be ever grateful for all of those Italian people who I got to know very personally on a one-on-one basis, Alfredo example, and all of that. So thank you very much for hearing me out.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We do have a little display over on the table if you care to take a look at that.
I might mention that, you know, I was in the Border Patrol here. I came here on May the 7th, when we accepted the first battalion. And maybe I'll tell you the rest of the story sometime because time is not permitted. I was also in the Sino-Japanese War. And at that time, talking about your pay, Mr. Chipilatto, we were paid... Alfredo Chipilatto, right?
No, don't forget about Chipilatto. I'm Alfredo.
We were paid $17 a month in Chinese money. And we ate fish heads and rice in the Sino-Japanese War. And so, you know, talking about treatment. But I might say, adding to what was said here, the Italians were very good prisoners. We didn't have any problem with it. I was the inside man because we had very few people. We had no one in the patrol who could speak Italian or German. And we did receive Germans here first. Some of them had been shot down over the English Channel, and they wanted to get back to Germany to fight. Because at that time, every day the radio was announcing the German army advancing through Russia. And Germany was winning the war. Now, before the United States took these people into custody, Congress had passed a law authorizing the president to order them because our shipping in the Atlantic was being sunk. Daily, we were trying to supply the Allies, British, authorizing them to seize those Axis ships, Germans and Italians at the time, that did not leave United States ports. So when you're talking about sabotage, the word that we had as border patrolmen, and I was in naval intelligence, I left here in September 1941. Since I had been in the service, I was called back into naval intelligence. And I then served during the war, and I served the flight deck chief on an aircraft carrier in a number of battles in the Pacific. But the word that we had here was that the reason these people were taken into custody is because their ships did not leave U.S. ports. As a matter of fact, several of their ships were scuttled. You see, they didn't wish, and here's Mrs. Jensen, her husband was there during the entire period. And I could tell you all about this period of the so-called, what did you call them, the repairman or something, the incident. I could tell you all about that because I was there, and I got a snoot full of tear gas at the time. nobody, none of the Italians were tear gassed, you see, but time does not permit to tell the rest of this story. I can tell you how the events leading up to World War II, how they occurred, the Panay and those, because I spent 33 months in the Asiatic Fleet, and I was attached to the Admiral's staff. Thank you. And my wife says
There is something to be, as you said, the least I don't like it to
It's supposed to be in court. And I was married with a child, Maxfield wife, and he called Washington D.C. During the war, it was very easy to get Washington D.C. In school in Washington, but I was one of those writing, 6 months. I remember, and because it was just about a year after, right away, and we still friends with Mike every time.
But you voted for him.
Oh, when I voted him before, he was, he's a great guy. It's not because he had people, but it was like, one of the great, I can say. He was very great. But he was a good friend of mine. Father-in-law, my father-in-law used to be very well known, and they used to go. Many years I used to have a many Italian. They used to go over there. So you better vote so. Else, all the Italian would vote what my father-in-law used to tell them.
I would be my guest.
Like I said, I told the people sometimes, especially in my business, people come over and say, I do have an asset. So where do you come from? I was born in Venice, Italy, anyway. I was born in Venice. I go over there every year. So in the summer, and I've been going there summer because I've been going singing with the Venice Club. France, Germany, Poland. I think the thing is, no, Poland is. We was living in Poland for 3 years. 2 years. By the way, talking about Poland, I have a card today from Krakow. Maria, Merry Christmas. I have one card from Latvia.
I think the more the biggest
one card from Tallinn. One card from was nice to go back, 50 years, a long time.
It is a long time, yeah.
Sometimes, so many things you forget about. I was on and like I said, 3 of those guys, I never forgot one guy, I still remember his name. I was so.